Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. New claims about the assassination of civil rights leader Malcolm X. The deathbed confession pointing to a conspiracy.
NYPD and the FBI orchestrated this meticulously.
A wife, allegedly forced by her husband to saw off her lover's head, asked to be released from jail. Prosecutors say she could have escaped, but her defense calls her a victim too.
The gun in her hand, shoot him. She refused to do that.
Plus, testimony in the no body murder trial, and we've got it here for you. Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. 56 years to the day after Malcolm X was assassinated in New York City, his nephew says a police officer confessed to his role in Malcolm X's murder. Law and Crime's Angenette Levy is here with the new revelations.
Yeah, Brian, 3 men were initially convicted of killing Malcolm X. One readily admitted his involvement, while the other 2 always said they were innocent. This new information could actually help exonerate those 2 men.
Who more personified the Black liberation movement in America in 1965 than civil rights icon Malcolm X?
Civil rights attorney Ben Crump stood before a crowd over the weekend to reveal that Malcolm X's assassination may have been the result of a conspiracy between New York City police officers and the FBI. A former NYPD officer's family says it involved luring his security guards into a plot that would lead to their arrests.
NYPD and the FBI orchestrated this meticulously, going to get the 2 people who Malcolm X depended on mostly for security.
The men were arrested and charged in a plot to attack the Statue of Liberty. The cousin of former NYPD Detective Ray Wood, an African-American officer in the 1960s, wrote a book about his uncle's 2011 deathbed confession letter. He read from the letter, in which he wrote that his supervisor actually cooked up the Statue of Liberty scheme.
He lived in constant fear for over 46 years, worried about what the NYPD and the FBI would do to him and his family if he had told the dark secrets that he had held that helped destroy Black leaders and Black power organizations.
Malcolm X's 2 bodyguards were arrested days before the assassination, so they weren't there to manage security at the Audubon Ballroom when he was killed.
I have requested this information be held until after I have passed away.
Any evidence that provides greater insight into the truth behind that terrible tragedy should be thoroughly investigated.
And Ray Wood actually died last November, and that is why that letter is coming out now. In the letter, Wood said he had no idea that Malcolm X was the intended target that day. The Manhattan DA's office is currently reviewing the case to make sure to see whether or not there were mistakes made. Now, Thomas Johnson is one of the men who was convicted in the case. He has already died. But Muhammad Aziz, he is 81 years old, and he wants to clear his name. The Innocence Project is actually representing both men to help them do that. Brian.
Thanks, Angenette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Adam Conta and Terry Austin. Terry, this information seems to confirm what many who followed the death or assassination, to be more accurate, of Malcolm X believed. If this murder was in fact a product of the FBI and NYPD, then what?
You know, Brian, this has huge ramifications because if this is corroborated and substantiated, we could really see an investigation of the NYPD and the FBI. 2 things came out with this confession. One, that they put this scheme together for the Statue of Liberty to take the security guards away from Malcolm X. And 2, they actually framed 2 individuals. So I definitely think that we might see some investigation as far as that's concerned, and also a wrongful death action by Malcolm X's family. And possibly we could see, other charges as well, such as, damages for a wrongful conviction. So there's a lot to be seen here.
Now, Adam, where are you in the authenticity of this letter? Are you skeptical, excited, angered? Where do you fall?
I mean, a little bit of all of it, right? If this turns out to be true, what this letter says, it makes sense. It's a logical flow of how this event took place. And so I'm not skeptical. I would love to see it investigated. I'd love to see it looked into. I would tell our viewers to don't hold your breath on a long-term investigation into the FBI and practices of the Manhattan DA's office, but I'd love to see that too.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath or put a bet on that. I know we both practice in the city here, Adam. I think we maybe have a little more inside information on how they investigate their own. Angenette, what about you? It wasn't just the two men who served time for the murder that Ray Wood mentioned in his letter, correct?
Yeah, that's right. There were other people mentioned in that letter. Reggie Wood, the one who his family member who wrote the book last year about all of this, he says that there were other people who were either wrongfully convicted or wrongfully accused of crimes. They were named in that letter. He gave a copy of that letter to the family members of those people. One of those people was actually Tupac Shakur's mother. She was arrested. She was an activist back in the 60s. She actually was put on trial and represented herself at trial. She was acquitted of the charges, and then just, about a month later gave birth to Tupac Shakur.
Yeah. Great story. Of course, we'll keep eyes on this. I know that Angenette and I are deeply excited about looking more into this Malcolm X case, and we will do so and give you back anything we find. Thank you, everyone. And now to Colorado, where an independent probe into the death of Elijah McClain is accusing police and paramedics of wrongdoings. 23-year-old Elijah McClain died in August 2019 after being placed in a chokehold by officers, then sedated by paramedics. Investigators commissioned by the Aurora City Council say first responders were flawed in their handling of the case. They say Aurora police had no justification to stop or use force to detain McClain. Police said at the time that a person had reported he looked sketchy. The report went on to say that fire rescue failed to corroborate the claims that McClain was suffering from excited delirium before injecting him with 500 milligrams of ketamine. A full presentation of the report is expected at a city council meeting. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, a wife allegedly held at gunpoint, forced to decapitate her boyfriend. But first, the Wisconsin trial of a husband accused of killing his wife. Testimony is back, and you don't want to miss it. After the break. Welcome back. Testimony has resumed in the Wisconsin trial of a husband accused of murdering his wife and making her body disappear. James Prokopovitz is charged with first-degree intentional homicide. He's accused of killing his wife of 24 years, Victoria Prokopovitz, in 2013. Investigators say it was part of his plan to be with his new girlfriend. The defense claims the victim suffered from mental health illnesses and attempted suicide multiple times. Her doctor says he treated her for anxiety, mood disorder, and bipolar disorder.
She stated that she feels so overwhelmed and so frustrated. She reported that the reason for the frustration definitely stems from the medication she's on and the number of the medicine she needs to calm her down and calm her anxiety and her paranoia and her mood instability and her sense of isolation and how abusive her husband is and how disabled her son is, who burned himself by accident as a child and when he was a young, and now he is jobless and totally dependent on her.
We try to note whether there is any suicidal or homicidal ideation. Did you make any notation on this date with respect to that finding?
Patient denied any suicidal or homicidal thoughts.
On cross, the defense asked about when the victim overdosed on medication in 2009.
Patient took an overdose. Her son apparently found her, and she was confused and disoriented. And he called the police, and she was brought in a chain of events, ended on the psychiatric ward, where I met with her a day after her admission.
And this was because she felt like she was having too much meds at that time, that she couldn't keep track of everything?
The clarity of what happened was unclear. What she overdosed on was unclear. She told me at one point she overdosed on Benadryl. She did not admit that this was a suicide attempt or this was an intention to end her life. Rather, she made it sound as if it is a very frustrated, confused person who is just making impulsive moves in different direction to calm herself down, to reduce the anxiety, to go to sleep. She's very upset.
Here to break down the no-body murder trial with a new judge is defense attorney Adam Conta and Terry Austin. Now, Terry, the prosecution called the doctor we just saw there earlier today to try to show that Victoria wasn't suicidal at the time, but you thought their testimony also helped the defense, right?
Yes, I think the prosecution did a great job, but I think the defense did a great job too. So the prosecutor was able to show that at the time she died, she was taking her medication, she was feeling better, she was using her coping skills, and she never really admitted that she committed suicide. You saw the clip there. But the defense came back on cross-examination, and he actually established that the last time the physician saw Vicky was 9 months before, and in fact, she was sometimes depressed and sometimes she was, happy. So I think that the cross-examination really did establish some doubt here, and we'll see what the jury decides at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is a boxing match going blow for blow, side by side. Adam, during the confidential informant's cross, he said he never heard Prokopovitz admit to killing Victoria, just that she would never be found. How's that testimony going to shape the trial?
Well, it's interesting. It's rare that we get to see a trial where I don't know how the prosecutor brought this in front of a jury. But I truly don't in this situation. I don't see how they can look a juror in the eye and say they can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. The confidential informant said that that the defendant had said not that he'd killed her, but that she was gone forever and they're never going to find her body. Well, you know who else said that? She said that the last time she tried to commit suicide to her daughter in the hospital. She said, "Next time you're never going to find me." So I just don't see any level of evidence here to really support these charges. Even the doctor that Terry just talked about just tried to describe the defendant as abusive. But then when it came time to talk about what that abusiveness was, it was that he had said he was worried about her medicine and medication, and that he wasn't sympathetic enough for her medical conditions. I just don't see this evidence culminating in a guilty verdict here.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that as strong as they maybe presented to begin with, but we'll keep eyes on that trial as we continue. Thanks you. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, what a one-sentence Supreme Court ruling means for former President Donald Trump. Plus, the lengths two Florida women are accused of taking to get a COVID-19 vaccine, and authorities are saying it wasn't their first time dressing up as senior citizens. Next. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed former President Trump a legal blow to his case in New York. Co-host Terry Austin explains.
Brian, the ruling cleared the way for New York prosecutor Cy Vance to obtain former President Donald Trump's tax returns. New York is investigating Trump for tax fraud in connection with the Trump Foundation and alleged hush money payments. The documents will be subject to grand jury secrecy, so at least for now, the public will not be able to see the records. Trump has been fighting for years to keep his tax returns secret, and unlike former presidents, Trump refused to disclose his tax returns when he campaigned, claiming that he could not release the records because he was being audited. This Supreme Court ruling will likely shed some light on the case against Trump in New York.
Terry, denied. SCOTUS gave no explanation or even dissents in denying the former president's request to block access to those taxes. So how could this affect the current and future investigation into criminal and civil cases?
Well, if the tax returns remain secret, there won't be any real impact on the other cases, but there are so many cases against Trump. I believe that what this is going to show is the New York case is going to jump to the top of the list, and Cy Vance will have the information that he needs to prosecute. Remember now, there are other cases like in Georgia and D.C. They're pursuing Trump for tax evasion and for fraud. So I think that they will, get in line to do that as well. And don't forget there's state charges against him as well, and defamation charges. So he'll be fighting battles for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of those other states are probably going to be looking to New York to see what happens with his taxes here to see if they can replicate or do the same there. Thanks, Terry. Turning now to other top legal news making headlines, we begin in the Buckeye State, Ohio. Border Patrol agents say a canine unit is to thank for sniffing out a cereal with a special kind of frosting. Narcotics detecting dog Biko intercepted a shipment of cornflakes coated in cocaine. Customs authorities say the package came into Cincinnati from South America and was headed to Hong Kong. After Biko's alert, officers opened the box and saw the flakes were in a grayish substance. The substance tested positive for cocaine. The 44 package has a reported street value of more than $2 million. A bomb squad called out to investigate a suspicious package in Ohio had a furry surprise. The Butler County Sheriff's Office says when units moved closer to the bag left in front of a church, they didn't hear ticking, but heard purring. Inside was a dangerously adorable mama cat and her 6 one-day-old kittens. A note said mom's name is Sprinkles and she went into labor the day before. The feline friends are reportedly warm, cozy, and fed at a local shelter. 2 women in Florida are on the hot seat for allegedly dressing up as grannies to get their second vaccine dose. According to the state's health department, the women were caught faking their birth dates, wearing gloves, glasses, and bonnets to pose as senior citizens. The Orange County Sheriff's Office says the women were actually 34 and 44 years old. Authorities say they don't know how they got away with it the first time, but their second go-around, deputies issued them a firm trespass warning.
You know what you have done? You've stolen a vaccine from somebody that needs it more than you. And now you're not going to get your second one. So that's a whole waste of time we just wasted here on this.
If you come back, anytime you're going to be arrested. Any question about that?
No, that's not.
You're lucky you're not being arrested right now.
Harry, I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Slightly comical, but many senior citizens looking to get that vaccine. When we come back, a love triangle gone horribly wrong. Why a wife is saying she was forced to decapitate her lover and her request to get out of jail after the break. And we're back. A New Hampshire woman accused of being forced by her own husband to saw off her lover's head will remain behind bars.
Armando found text messages on Britany's phone, and then he beat her in the bathroom of their home in response to that. The way she described that was he grabbed me by the neck and threw me down. He showed me the phone. I'm quoting her. He put the gun in my mouth, and I kept screaming, so he choked me so my girls wouldn't hear me. There's a state park area where Armando lured him there. He beat Mr. Amaral. Armando was armed with a gun. He continued to beat Britany on the way over to that park. It was immediately before Mr. Amaral was shot, where Armando Barron is in the passenger seat of Mr. Amaral's car, and he's made Britany get in the front driver's seat because he's going to make her drive her car. And then Armando gets out briefly. And the state says that in their motion, well, she could have armed herself with the machete in the car and attacked Armando when he came back in. And the only reason they know about this, or any of this, frankly, is because Britany told them about it.
Prosecutors say they agree that she was a victim of domestic violence and have charged her husband as such. But they cite her alleged actions after the murder for reasons why she should remain in custody.
She made the choice to decapitate Jonathan, to bury his head separate from his body, and in her words, dump him in a brook in the woods, to leave him there. Her own words when she was being walked out of the woods by Fish and Game was that she was, I'm in big trouble. It wasn't that she felt endangered. The reason she wasn't talking to the conservation officers is because she knew she had been caught. And her admission of guilt, or the fact that she's stating, I'm in big trouble, shows you her mindset at that point. It's not that she was fearful of Armando. She was fearful that she was in trouble for her criminal choices, Your Honor.
Defendant's motion to amend or modify bail is denied, and the state's request to keep the preventative detention in order is granted.
Back one last time to discuss death, decapitation, and duress is defense attorney Adam Conta and Terry Austin. Adam, duress gets thrown around a lot as a reason why people are forced to do things. And in court, it's a pretty rare defense. But in this case, it doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the definition of duress is being forced to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do by fear of either threats of violence or psychological torture, essentially. she had both happen. She described a horrific scene that was both psychologically and physically extremely violent. Her expectation of being able to fight her way out wielding some machete like an action hero just doesn't seem realistic when she just had the ever-loving heck beaten out of her and is in the midst of a murder. I just think that this is absolutely a situation where the duress defense would be appropriate.
Yeah, Tara, we look at these photos right here of Britany Barron and that face. I mean, she had opportunities to escape is what the prosecution is trying to argue. If the facts are the way they're presented and are true, then she was beat by her husband and saw him, being her husband, kill a man before her very eyes. So is Britany Barron victim or criminal to you?
Brian, she absolutely is a victim here. There's no question. I agree 100% with Adam here. Look, everybody responds differently to duress, but she just witnessed the fact that her husband killed mercifully this individual and beat him. And the fact that she was beaten, I think that, you know, she might not have been able to defend herself either with a, machete or even with a gun. And I think she feared the fact that if she tried to defend herself, or even if she tried to save her lover's life, that in fact, her husband would turn that anger on her and kill her as well. So I think that she's a victim here, and, she hopefully will get off on that.
Yeah, I'm calling it, man. We'll see how the defense goes. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.